Hi everyone, it's Steph from the Novelty Corner and welcome back to my channel. Today I have my books beside my bed video. For those of you who are new here, I film one of these every week where I wrap up the last 7 days worth of reading, and for those who are very familiar with the series, welcome back. This is my reading wrap up for the week where I was participating in my own self-imposed reading challenge, Read Digital, to read as many digital books as I could. It is my reading week from the 26th until the 2nd of May. I read a total of 10 books this week, 3,392 pages, and my yearly reading total is up to 157 books. I was participating in 3 reading challenges throughout the week. There was the weekend smutathon, there was my Read Digital challenge, and there was also Romanceopoly. I do have 10 books to talk about. I'm going to try and be super brief about them. The first book that I read this week was a reread, so I'm going to be super brief about this one, and it was Learn My Lesson by Katee Robert, which is book 2 in the Wicked Villain series. It was published in 2019 by Trinkets and Tales LLC, and I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. I read it for Read Digital to reread a book, and I read it for Smutathon because it is a very steamy book. The Wicked Villain series, if you have not been following along on my channel for any period of time in the last 6 months, is Disney villain retelling dark romance stories, and they are a lot of fun, but they are definitely very adult. And Learn My Lesson is the second book. It takes place in Hades' underworld bar, and it is a BDSM bar, and he basically is the information stockbroker of this world. His right hand is Meg, and he has Meg unwittingly lure Hercules to his bar where he strikes a deal with him, and it is a MMF relationship dark romance story. I really liked all of the characters and it's just fun. I really love the characters in this world because it is like a mafia romance, but not. So I don't know, it's just a fun series to read. Then I read Cocky Bastard by Vi Keeland and Penelope Ward. This is 2015 release from Kindle. I gave this one 3.5 out of 5 stars. Again, I read it for the weekend smutathon. I also read it for the Read Digital challenge for a book to read and share your thoughts. I'm sharing my thoughts on this video. I also shared my thoughts on Twitter. It is the story of Aubrey and Chance, who have a very unexpected meeting at a roadhouse while traveling to the West Coast, and when Chance's bike breaks down, he ends up on a road trip with Aubrey, and the two bicker a lot, and eventually they have all these unexpected little side trips as part of the road trip. They begin to have feelings for one another and things start to get very steamy, and then after a sham wedding in Las Vegas, Chance disappears the next morning and Aubrey is heartbroken, and that is the first half of the book. And the first half of the book is told from Aubrey's perspective, and then we switch in the second half of the book to Chance's perspective and we find out why he disappeared. And I was less thrilled with the second half of the book as I was with the first half of the book, so that's why I didn't get rated higher. Then I read Beach Read, which is a 2020 upcoming release from Berkeley by Emily Henry. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I loved this book. It is a contemporary romance book. I read it for my Read Digital challenge to read my most recent acquisition. I did receive an e-arc of this from NetGalley and I was so excited. It did also fit my Romanceopoly challenge Spring, which was to read a book with a yellow cover. I have no words. So I think this is a close second to The Hating Game so far in my favorite books that just delighted me while I was reading them this year. It's practically everywhere on BookTube, but if you haven't heard of it, it is the story of 2 writers. January Andrews, who writes romance books, and Augustus Everett, who writes literary fiction. The two of them went to college together and they sort of have this, well, January thinks they have this mini rivalry going on. And when January escapes to a beachside holiday house that belonged to her late father, and there's some drama there, but I won't go into it, she discovers that Augustus is living in the beach house next door. And this provides some very entertaining banter between the two of them, and then eventually, after both critiquing each other's preferred writing genres, they decide to switch genres, and Augustus is going to write a romance book and January is going to write a literary fiction. And the two spend most of the week writing, and then they also devise one day each a week where they take the other person and they give them sort of a task or a field trip to help them understand the other's preferred genre more, and it was just delightfully fun. I highly recommend it. I've already pre-ordered a copy of the book for myself because I really want to reread it already. Then I read Romancing the Duke by Tessa Dare. This is the first book in the Castles Ever After series. I forgot to write down the year of publication and the publisher, but I did give it 4 out of 5 stars. I read it for my Read Digital challenge to read a book that was recommended in a podcast. This book follows Isolde Ophelia Goodnight, who is left destitute after the death of her very famed author father, and everything in his will was left to her cousin, who she can't stand and who does not like her, so she's been left with nothing until a solicitor arrives and tells her that she has inherited a castle, and it's kind of run down and decrepit and still inhabited by its former owner, a duke named Ransom. And Ransom is not quite keen on giving up his castle to Izzy and doesn't even want her there, but she sort of begins to break down his barriers. And Izzy is a truly wonderful character. She wants financial independence. She's very strong and forward, and we find out she has a secret that no one knows. And alongside all of that, she also has this league of fans who loved her father's stories so much that they roleplay and dress up as characters and citizens from those stories, and they eventually begin to play a part in the story as well. So it was just delightfully fun and entertaining, and it was my first Tessa's Dare book. It will not be my last. Stay tuned. I also read Dear Enemy by KRISTEN CALLIHAN. This is a 2020 release from Kindle Unlimited, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I read this for my Read Digital challenge to read an anticipated book. I do like KRISTEN CALLIHAN's work. And I'm also using it to tick off the Romanceopoly challenge post office, which was to read an epistolary story. I mean, this is not a story that is entirely told in letters, but there are letters that are part of the story that are sort of an important part towards the end of the book. So I'm counting it. The two main characters are Macon and Delilah, and both of them hated each other while they were growing up. They were in high school together, and they just made each other's lives miserable. And this was compounded by the fact that Macon was dating Delilah's sister Samantha on and off for years. Now that they're grown, Delilah is a chef who has just shut down her catering business in order to go and travel around the world and learn a few new cooking tricks and tips in order to come back and restore her business. And Macon is a very successful action star. At the very start of the book, Delilah receives a phone call from Macon, and she can't believe that he's calling her. She still can't stand him. She discovers that he's trying to track down her sister Samantha, who he had hired as his PA, but she has disappeared, and she has stolen his late mother's very expensive watch, which was an heirloom that he was holding on to. In order to prevent Macon from going to the police, Delilah strikes a deal with Macon, and she ends up working as his PA and personal chef. And the two have the greatest banter. They clearly have not spent any time trying to get to know each other aside from their hatred and annoyance from childhood. And so this spills over into every conversation that they have for the first part of the book. It is an enemies to lovers story. It was entertaining and fun, and I don't mind celebrity romances either, but this one has a bit of a darker undertone because we discover that Macon has been injured in a car crash that was caused by a stalker. And so this still colours everything that he does. So the whole thing was just quite interesting, and it was nice to read something else by KRISTEN CALLIHAN, particularly a newer release, so I'm glad that I read it. I also read The Raven Boys by Maggie Stiefvater. This is the first book in the Raven Cycle trilogy that was first published in 2012 by Montlake, and I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. I know this is a really beloved book. I don't know if I could actually explain really clearly what is happening in the story, because I enjoyed the story. It is a YA urban fantasy book, but I'm a bit flaky on, the actual intended purpose of the story. So we follow Blue Sargent, who is the daughter of a clairvoyant mother, and she lives in a wonderful house that is full of clairvoyant women who surround her mother. They're either friends or aunts or whoever. Loved that concept. Blue herself is not clairvoyant, but every year she stands watch with her mother to watch over the soon to be dead. And she never sees them, but this year she spots a boy called Gansey, and he's, doomed to die in the next 12 months. She recognizes him as one of the local private school boys, and she decides that she wants to find out what is going on because she's never had a vision of the soon-to-be-dead before. Her paths cross with Gansey, and she finds herself drawn into his circle of friends, who she nicknames the Raven Boys, and they are investigating the resting place of a dead Welsh king. And that's about where I am with understanding the story. I may continue it in the future. I haven't decided yet, but we shall see. I also read Changeless by Gail Carriger. This is the second book in the Parasol Protectorate series. It was published in 2010 by Hachette. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I read it for the Read Digital Challenge, which was a free choice. I have been meaning to continue this series, so it seemed like a good time. We follow a character called Alexia, who is a soulless, and this is particularly important in the world because there are not very many soulless, but it is a sort of steampunk historical fiction urban fantasy story. And Alexia is married to the local werewolf Alpha, and one morning she wakes up to find that he is yelling at someone and then very promptly disappears. And she finds out later on that there is some sort of supernatural illness that has struck London, in that all the supernatural beings have suddenly been turned human, and they stay that way for about 24 hours. She begins to follow the clues to find out exactly what is going on, whether it is an illness or whether it is something scientific in nature, and it eventually leads her to Scotland and her husband's former pack. Lots of drama ensues. I don't think I enjoyed this one as much as I enjoyed the first book, but there is a lot of really fun banter between characters in this series. It's very smart, and I very much enjoyed. It's a great world to be in. I also read The Hidden Blade by Pippa DaCosta. This is the first book in the Soul Eater series. It's a novella. This one was published in 2016 by Crazy Ace Books, and I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. I read it for the Read Digital Challenge to read a free book, something that I downloaded for free. This one is an urban fantasy series that has a lot of Egyptian mythology, and we follow Ace, and we don't really know what his true name is, but he is a soul eater. I'm reading lots of books about soul eaters at the moment. He is a private investigator in New York who is unfortunately bound by a curse to Osiris, who is the mayor of New York, and has some very interesting ideas about what is appropriate and not appropriate. Anyway, Osiris commands Ace, and at the beginning of the story, Ace is approached by his ex-wife, the goddess Bastet. She wants him to help her uncover who is murdering pregnant women in New York City, and everything sort of spirals from there as Ace finds himself caught in a bit of a web between very powerful gods. It was fun. I haven't read anything with ancient Egyptian mythology for a while, so I really enjoyed it. Then I read The Sea King's Daughters, which is a collection. Then I read The Sea King's Daughters Volume 1, which is a collection of 3 novellas about mermaids/sirens. I think there's the mythology there is blurred together for the purpose of the books. The collection was published in 2018 by Kindle. I gave it, I think, overall 3 out of 5 stars. I read it for the Read Digital Challenge to read a book in your PJs. I did swap this out with another book. It features 3 stories: Siren Tide by Philippa Ballantyne, Siren's Serenity by Stacia D. Kelly, and Siren's Curse by Katee Robert. I mainly read it because I wanted to read some more of Katee Robert's books because I adore her now. And all 3 of these books are very short. They're about 70 to 80 pages long. They feature siren/mermaid shapeshifter women who are living on Earth after having been sent there through a portal by their father. Their purpose is to ensure that the world is ready for mermaids to return. So the mermaids at some point have been kicked off Earth and exiled, and they really want to return. They're all very short, very simple mysteries. I think the world building was lacking a little bit in them because they were so short, so it sort of made it hard to follow at times. But that said, very interesting concept. I like mermaid and siren stories, and for what they were for very short reads, they were entertaining. And the final book that I read this week was In Bed with Mr. Wrong, also by Katee Robert. This is the first book in her Out of Uniform series. It was published in 2014 by Entangled Brazen, and I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. It's sort of like a bonus digital ebook that I read this week. We follow Bree, who is a librarian, and Ryan, who is an Air Force pararescuer. They are set up on a blind date by Ryan's brother and a friend of Bree's. From the very first moment, the two do not hit it off. They have a constant miscommunication and misunderstanding trope, and they get through their first date by basically arguing. And then when Ryan drops Bree off, they find that they have really good sexual chemistry. They have what they think is a one-night stand, and they call it quits. And this sort of goes on and off. They have a couple of chance encounters where everything goes horribly wrong, and then eventually Ryan's brother and Bree's friend strand them alone in a cabin in the woods in the middle of nowhere with no way of getting out in the middle of a snowstorm until they can sort out what is going on between them. And that is basically the story. It's not very long. It's only like 250 pages. It was entertaining. It would have been really good for Smuttathon. I'm going to enjoy exploring Katee Robert's backlist titles in the next few months. So be warned. So those are all the books that I read in the last week. In the comments below, let me know if you have read any of them or if you're planning on reading any of them in the future. I would love to know. I'd also love to hear what you have been reading over the last week or so. I hope that wherever you're in the world, you're having a wonderful day, and I'll catch you guys in my next video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye guys.